Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was cursed by Loki and turned into a villain. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air in the unforeseen simulation joint was thick with the metallic tang of blood and the acrid smoke of destruction. For Izuku Midoriya, it was the taste of his own inadequacy. He, Tsuyu and Minoru Mineta were half submerged in the frigid water of the shipwreck zone, hidden behind a concrete ledge, watching a nightmare unfold. Aizawa-sensei, their homeroom teacher, the underground hero Eraserhead, was being systematically, brutally dismantled. Each sickening crunch of bone, each wet thud of his head against the plaza stone, was a hammer blow to Midoriya's soul. He had seen heroes fight on television his whole life. He had analyzed thousands of battles, filling notebook after notebook with observations and theories. None of it, not a single scribbled page, had prepared him for the sheer, visceral reality of a life-or-death struggle. The monster, the hulking, bird-beak thing they called a Nomu, was not fighting. It was executing. "We have to do something," Midoriya whispered, his voice trembling so hard his teeth chattered, and not just from the cold. His gaze was fixed on the plaza, where the pale, hand-covered villain, Tamura Shigaraki, was gloating over Aizawa's broken form. "Are you insane?" Mineta hissed, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. Purple spheres of his own quirk clung to his hair like grotesque grapes. That thing, it went toe-to-toe with Aizawa-sensei, and Aizawa-sensei erased its quirk. "It's just that strong. We'll die. We'll be smeared across the ground like jam." "Mineta's right, Midoriya-chan," Tsuyu said, her voice unnervingly calm, though a fine tremor ran through her limbs. "Ribbit. We're outmatched. Our best bet is to wait for the pros to arrive. All Might will come, All Might." The name was a prayer. But as Midoriya watched Shigaraki's hand, 5 fingers outstretched, move toward Tsuyu's face just moments before, he knew waiting wasn't always an option. His own body had moved on its own, a desperate surge of one for all that had done little more than get his fingers broken and stir the water. He was a liability, a child with a god's power sleeping in his bones, and he couldn't even figure out how to wake it up without shattering himself. The Noma held Aizawa's head aloft, its grip tightening. The sickening crack that followed echoed across the USJ, a sound of finality. Midoriya's breath hitched. A scream of pure rage and grief tried to claw its way up his throat, but it was choked off by a sudden, deafening boom. Boom! The main doors of the USJ, thick metal plates designed to withstand a siege, were blown inward, reduced to shrapnel and twisted scrap. And standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright afternoon sun, was him. He wasn't smiling. Not yet. The fury on All Might's face was a terrible thing to behold, a tempest of righteous power that seemed to warp the very air around him. The change in atmosphere was instantaneous. The oppressive dread that had settled over the facility was punctured, not by hope, but by the promise of overwhelming, retaliatory force. "Have no fear," he said, and his voice was not the booming, cheerful sound from the television. It was low, resonant, and filled with a killing cold. "Because I am here." Shigaraki, who had been scratching his neck with a manic energy, actually recoiled. The lesser villains scattered around the USJ froze, their petty acts of violence forgotten in the face of a true titan. "We were waiting for you, hero," Shigaraki rasped, his voice dripping with a childish, spiteful glee. "You're late." All Might was a blur of red, white, and blue. He moved faster than Midoriya's eyes could track. A living thunderbolt that scooped up the broken form of Aizawa and secured the other students in the blink of an eye. He deposited them a safe distance away, his movements precise and economical despite the incredible speed. "Everyone," he said, his back to them, a mountain of muscle and resolve. "Go to the entrance. I leave Aizawa in your hands. He's unconscious. Hurry!" Midoriya found himself next to Mineta and Tsuyu again, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He wanted to obey, to run, but his feet were rooted to the spot. This was it. The symbol of peace versus the thing designed to kill him. This was a battle that would define their era. But All Might. Midoriya started, seeing the steam rising gently from the hero's body. He saw the grim set of his jaw. He wasn't smiling. That was the most terrifying part. Go! All Might commanded, without turning. The battle began. It was not a fight, it was a cataclysm. When All Might threw a punch, it didn't just connect. It created a miniature hurricane. The air pressure alone was enough to send debris skittering across the plaza. But the Nomu, it took the blow. It took a Carolina smash that should have pulverized a skyscraper, and its body simply absorbed the impact. My Nomu has shock absorption, Shigaraki cackled, dancing on the spot like a deranged marionette. It also has super regeneration. It's a living punching bag, specifically designed to withstand you at 100%. You can't beat him, All Might. Your golden age will end here. Bleeding out on the floor of this training center, Midoriya watched, his analytical mind kicking into overdrive despite his fear. He saw it now. All Might was hitting harder and faster, but the Nomu wasn't breaking. Each punch that should have ended the fight was merely a prelude to the next. All Might was a sledgehammer trying to shatter a pillow made of concrete. And worse, Midoriya knew the secret. The ticking clock. The terrible injury hidden beneath the hero's shirt. All Might couldn't sustain this. The two behemoths locked arms, a stalemate of impossible forces. The ground beneath their feet cracked and splintered, forming a spiderweb of fissures that spread across the plaza. The very structure of the dome groaned under the strain. It was in this crucible of power, this grinding friction between the legacy of One for All and the engineered horror of shock absorption, that reality began to fray at the edges. It started subtly. A shimmer in the air just above the battling pair, like a heat haze on a summer road. But the air was cold. Midoriya blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light, or perhaps his own tears blurring his vision. But it persisted. The shimmer grew, coalescing. It was a distortion, a patch of wrongness in the world. Then a sound. It wasn't the thunder of fists or the screech of stressed metal. It was a high-pitched, harmonic whine, like crystal glasses being rubbed by 1,000 phantom fingers. It cut through the din of the battle, burrowing directly into Midoriya's skull. He saw Kirishima and Bakugo, who were now engaged with the Warp Gate villain Kurojiri, falter and look up. Even Shigaraki paused his manic scratching, his visible eye widening in confusion. The shimmer solidified. A hairline crack appeared in the empty air, thin and dark. Then another and another, spreading out like ice cracking on a frozen lake. But instead of darkness within the cracks, there was light, a sickly, viridian green that pulsed with an energy that felt profoundly, fundamentally alien. It was not the wholesome, vibrant green of Midoriya's own lightning, but a venomous, ancient hue that promised trickery and rot. The cracks widened, the green light bleeding out, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to have a life of their own. The whine intensified into a discordant shriek, and the fissure tore open, gaping like a wound in the fabric of space-time. It was not a door or a portal. It was a violation. From the swirling, chaotic depths of the rift, a figure stepped through. He did not stumble or fall. He emerged with the poise of an actor stepping onto a stage, his boot landing on the stone of the plaza with a soft, confident click. He was tall and slender, garbed in immaculate black leather and dark green fabric, accented with plates of gleaming gold armor at his shoulders and wrists. His hair was raven black, slicked back from a pale, aristocratic face with high cheekbones and intelligent, piercing eyes. He held a golden scepter in one hand, its tip glowing with a faint blue light. He took a slow, deliberate breath of the USJ's air, a faint, amused smile playing on his lips. His eyes, the color of sharp emeralds, swept the scene. This was Loki, Prince of Asgard, God of Mischief. And he had not the faintest idea where he was. One moment, he had been navigating a particularly volatile passage between the branches of Yggdrasil, a shortcut he was quite proud of discovering. The next, he'd felt a pull, a resonance of colossal, untamed power clashing, and had been unceremoniously yanked through the veil. His first assessment was one of profound disappointment. He saw the hand-covered man-child, Shigaraki. A tantrum in human form, Loki thought, his lip curling in disdain. All rage, no artistry. He wants to break the toys, not master the game. His gaze fell upon the Nomu, still locked in a contest of strength with the blonde behemoth. A golem. A mindless beast of burden. Powerful, yes, but utterly without will or cunning. A butcher's tool, not a scalpel. Then, his eyes settled on All Might. The hero's face was a mask of strained effort, sweat and blood mingling on his brow. He was magnificent, in a brutish sort of way. A perfect specimen of heroic iconography. Ah, the archetype, Loki mused, a flicker of genuine amusement in his eyes. The shining champion, draped in primary colors and self-righteousness. How dreadfully predictable. This world's defenders are as subtle as a thrown hammer. He felt the raw power radiating from the hero, a strange, generational energy, passed down like a crown. It was noble. It was pure. And to Loki, it was crushingly, insufferably boring. Chaos was an art form. True, lasting chaos couldn't be achieved by simply smashing things. It required the subversion of ideals, the corruption of symbols. You didn't break the statue. You made the people themselves tear it down. Shigaraki finally found his voice. Who the hell are you? Are you another one of the final bosses? Loki didn't even grant him a glance. The child wasn't worth his attention. He was a piece to be swept from the board, not a player. No, if he was to make his mark on this strange, new world, and perhaps find a way home, he would need to do something memorable. Something with style. His gaze continued its sweep, past the brawling children, past the warp gate entity, and settled on the small cluster of students near the entrance. His eyes, magically enhanced, zoomed in. He saw the terrified grape child, the stoic frog girl, and then, him, the boy with the wild, forest green hair and eyes to match. The one trembling, not just with fear, but with a barely contained energy. Loki could taste it. It was the same power as the blonde champions, but nascent, raw, and untainted. It was a wellspring of pure, unadulterated hope, a legacy of peace and order, condensed into the heart of one terrified, breakable boy. Loki's smile widened. It was a slow, predatory spreading of lips that did not reach his eyes. Oh, now this is interesting. He could feel the boy's potential like a beacon. The desperate desire to be a hero. The selfless heart. The crushing weight of the legacy he carried. To simply kill him would be a waste of good material. To break his body would be trivial. But to take that shining core of heroism, that symbol in the making, and invert it? To twist that selfless desire into a selfish one? To make that hope a source of despair for others? To turn the next symbol of peace into an agent of glorious, beautiful chaos? Now that was a story worth telling. That was a masterpiece. On the plaza, the stalemate broke. All Might, with a roar that shook the dome, pushed the Noma back. He knew he had one, maybe two, big punches left before his time limit was up. He had to end this now. He bent his knees, power surging through him, the very air crackling with the green-white lightning of One for All. You may have been made to fight me, monster, All Might bellowed, his voice echoing with conviction. But I am a hero. I am constantly evolving. I will always push past my limits. He reared back his fist. To save everyone. Midoriya watched, mesmerized. This was it. The final blow. He could feel the power building, a physical pressure on his skin. Go beyond. All Might roared. Plus ultra. The punch was not a physical impact. It was a weather event. The sound barrier shattered a dozen times over. A tornado of wind erupted from All Might's fist, catching the Noma square in the chest. The shock absorption quirk, designed for single, direct impacts, was overwhelmed by the sheer, sustained, multi-vectored force. The creature was launched like a cannonball, tumbling end over end, crashing through the dome's wall panels and disappearing into the sky, a rapidly shrinking speck. The resulting blowback was immense. A massive cloud of dust and debris billowed out, obscuring the entire central plaza in a thick, gray fog. The students coughed, shielding their eyes. The world was reduced to sound and shadow. This was the moment. The perfect cover. For Midoriya, the world went silent. The roar of the wind, Mineta's terrified squeals, Suyu's concerned croaks, all of it faded into a dull, distant hum. A sudden, piercing cold seized him, a cold that had nothing to do with the water he stood in. It was a coldness of the soul. He felt a presence behind him. Before he could turn, before he could even register the danger, a slender, cool hand rested gently on the back of his neck. Another hand, fingers surprisingly strong, tilted his chin up. He was frozen, paralyzed by an unseen force. He looked up into a pair of smiling, emerald-green eyes, inches from his own. It was the man from the rift. He hadn't made a sound. Such fire, Loki murmured, his voice a silken whisper that was for Midoriya's ears alone. Such a desperate need to be a beacon in the dark. A noble, foolish impulse. Midoriya's heart seized. He tried to scream, to activate one for all, to do anything. But his body was not his own. The man's gaze was hypnotic, ancient, and filled with a terrifying, intellectual amusement. But beacons don't just guide, Loki continued, his smile turning cruel at the edges. They also attract moths to a flame. They cast the longest shadows. Order, peace, society. They are all just prettier cages. True salvation isn't found in rules, little hero. It's found in liberation. His thumb stroked Midoriya's cheek, a gesture that was almost tender, yet carried the predatory chill of a serpent. Your heart is a fortress built on a lie. Let's tear it down and build something truly magnificent in its place. A symbol not of a fragile peace, but of glorious, unassailable truth. The scepter, which Loki had been holding, vanished in a shimmer of green light. He brought his free hand up, 2 fingers extended, and pressed them gently against the center of Midoriya's forehead. The touch was like being struck by lightning and frozen in ice at the same time. A jolt of alien energy, cold and sharp, shot through Midoriya's skull and cascaded down his spine, invading every nerve, every cell. It was not a physical attack, it was a spiritual violation. He felt the pure, warm light of one for all recoil, hissing and fighting against the intrusion. But this new energy was a cunning poison. It didn't try to overpower his quirk, it began to weave itself into it, to corrupt it from within. Loki leaned in close, his lips brushing against Midoriya's ear. He whispered a string of words in a language that was all hard consonants and flowing vowels, a melody of ancient Norse that felt like grinding stone and flowing ice. Harda, Vilji, Minnesota. Your heart, my will. A vision flashed through Midoriya's mind, his notebooks, his analysis of heroes, but now every page was filled with their flaws, their failures, the collateral damage they caused. Skipanen, Glundra, Minnesota. Your order, my chaos. Another vision, the shining image of All Might, his smile broad and reassuring. But the smile warped, becoming a grotesque, predatory grin. The ideals of heroism twisted into justifications for control and oppression. The best stories, Loki breathed, a final puff of cold air against his skin, are tragedies. Let's write yours, little hero. The last thing Izuku Midoriya saw was Loki's triumphant, knowing smirk. Then, the world fractured. The warm, golden light of the vestiges of One for All in his soul was swarmed by a tide of malevolent green. A sharp, unbearable pain lanced through his mind, and then, nothing. From Tsuyu and Manetta's perspective, one moment Midoriya was standing there, staring into the dust cloud. The next, his body went rigid. His eyes, normally wide and expressive, snapped shut. When they opened again, just for a fraction of a second, the familiar forest green was gone, replaced by a glowing, sinister emerald. A light that mirrored the one from the rift. Then, his eyes rolled back in his head, and his body went limp. Before he could even fall into the water, he and the strange, dark figure behind him dissolved into a swirl of green and black particles, vanishing with a faint, echoing chuckle that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The dust cloud finally began to settle. The pro-heroes had arrived, a cacophony of sirens, shouting, and the thud of running feet. Cementos was already erecting walls, Snipe was providing cover fire, and the rest of the UA faculty were swarming the facility, rounding up the remaining villains. All Might stood in the center of the plaza, his body steaming heavily, the time limit on his power perilously close. He watched Shigaraki and Kurojiri vanish, a failure that stung, but the students were safe. That was all that mattered. He did a quick head count as the other teachers helped the dazed students. Young Bakugo, young Kirishima, good, you're all right. His eyes scanned the group. Where is young Midoriya? Silence. The students looked around, confusion on their faces. He was just with us, Tsuyu said, her brow furrowed. By the water. Ribbit. I thought he ran to the entrance with us. Mineta cried, his voice shrill. A cold dread, far colder than the Noma's fists, gripped All Might's heart. He ignored the screaming protest of his own broken body and rushed to the edge of the shipwreck zone. He saw the disturbed water, the place where they had been hiding. But the boy was gone. Midoriya! He called out, his voice losing its heroic timbre, replaced by the thin, reedy voice of Toshinori Yagi. Young Midoriya, his eyes, sharp and practiced, scanned the area for any sign of a struggle, for blood, for anything. There was nothing. Just the damp concrete, and the lingering smell of ozone from his own attack. But then he saw it. On the ground, exactly where Tsuyu was pointing, was a mark. It was a perfect circle, about the size of a dinner plate, lightly scorched into the stone. It wasn't the result of an explosion or a quirk he recognized. The edges were too clean, too precise. He knelt, his knees protesting, and cautiously touched the mark. It was unnaturally cold, and the smell. It wasn't just ozone and burnt concrete. There was something else woven into it, a faint, cloying scent like burnt sugar and something else, something ancient and inorganic, like the dust of a dead star. It was the scent of a power that did not belong in their world, the scent of a variable he had never, in all his years, accounted for. Toshinori's blood ran cold. The final punch, the plus ultra that had saved them all, had created the dust cloud. The whirlwind he had unleashed to defeat the Nomu had been the perfect cover. The very act of his victory had provided the opportunity for his successor to be taken. He stared at the empty, cold mark on the ground, then down at his own trembling, bloody fist. The symbol of his power. The tool of his success. And now, the instrument of his most profound and devastating failure. The symbol of peace stood alone in the ruin of the USJ, the cheers of the saved students, and the relieved shouts of his colleagues fading into a meaningless buzz. All he could hear was the echo of a silent scream. All he could see was the ghost of a green-haired boy, his hopeful smile now a gaping hole in the future. And a single, horrifying thought solidified in his mind, heavy and cold as a tombstone. I lost him. The first sensation was cold. A deep, penetrating cold that seeped through his tattered hero costume and seemed to settle in his bones. It was the cold of polished stone against his cheek, the cold of still, sterile air filling his lungs. Izuku Midoriya's consciousness returned not in a rush, but as a slow, creeping tide of disorientation. There was a dull, throbbing ache behind his eyes, a phantom echo of the searing pain that had consumed him. He pushed himself up, his muscles protesting. His hands, calloused and scarred from his frantic training, slid on a surface as smooth and black as polished obsidian. He wasn't in the USJ. The scent of blood, water, and ozone was gone, replaced by something ancient and strange, the dry, crisp smell of old parchment, the sharp tang of static electricity, and a faint, sweet aroma like decaying starlight. He was in a hall of impossible scale. The ceiling soared hundreds of feet above him, lost in shadow, supported by twisting columns of black stone veined with gold that seemed to defy gravity. The only light came from torches set in ornate, golden sconces, but the flames within were not orange or yellow. They were a brilliant, flickering emerald, the same venomous green as the rift, casting long, dancing shadows that writhed like living things. The architecture was all sharp angles and majestic curves, a style so alien it made his head spin. It felt less like a room and more like the inside of a god's jewel box. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through him. All Might? He called out, his voice a pathetic, wavering thing that was swallowed by the immense space. Aizawa-sensei? He scrambled to his feet, his body screaming in protest. His first instinct, his only instinct in the face of a threat, was to call upon his power. He clenched his fist, focused on that familiar wellspring of energy deep within his core, and reached for one for all. Nothing. No, not nothing. Worse than nothing. He felt a flicker of the familiar warmth, a brief spark of that golden legacy, but it was immediately smothered. A cold, serpentine presence wrapped around it, constricting it, suffocating it. The green energy he had seen, the energy from the man's touch, was now coiled around the heart of his quirk like a viper. When he tried to draw on his power, it was this alien energy that responded, sending a nauseating, icy tingle up his arm instead of the familiar, crackling power. He felt violated, contaminated. Ah, you're awake. Good. The voice was calm, cultured, and laced with amusement. Midoriya spun around, his heart hammering against his ribs. There, seated on a throne of carved dark wood that seemed to have grown from the floor itself, was the man from the USJ. He was casually flipping through a thick, leather-bound book with no title, one leg crossed elegantly over the other. He didn't look like a kidnapper. He looked like a king in his court, momentarily disturbed from his reading. Who are you? Where am I? Midoriya stammered, forcing himself into a shaky fighting stance that felt utterly useless. What did you do to me? To my quirk? The man looked up from his book, a slow, patient smile gracing his features. He closed the tome with a soft thump and set it aside. So many questions. Such a frantic little creature. He rose from the throne and descended the few steps to the main floor, his movements fluid and graceful. My name is Loki. And as for where you are, let us call it a classroom. A private study. Your old one, I must say, was rather loud. Let me go! Midoriya shouted, a burst of defiant terror. My friends, the heroes, they'll be looking for me. They'll find you. Loki chuckled, a low, melodic sound that held no warmth. Oh, I have no doubt they're looking. But they are looking for a boy who was kidnapped. A victim. They won't think to look for a student who is finally receiving a proper education. He stopped a dozen feet away, his emerald eyes pinning Midoriya in place. You ask what I did to your power. I did not take it. I did not break it. I simply added a missing component. A leash. You held the power of a god in your hands, boy, and you used it like a clumsy child, breaking your own bones because you were told it was the heroic thing to do. I am here to teach you control, to teach you purpose. My purpose is to be a hero. Midoriya shot back, the words a shield he had held his entire life. To save people. To become the next symbol of peace. Loki's smile widened. Is it now? And what a noble, beautiful, and utterly flawed purpose that is. He began to pace slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Tell me, Izuku Midoriya, when you vow to save everyone, who exactly do you mean? The question caught Midoriya off guard. I mean everyone. Innocent people. People in danger. Innocent people, Loki mused, tapping a finger to his chin. Like the family whose apartment was destroyed as a necessary loss when Endeavor fought that sludge villain last month. Their home, their memories, reduced to rubble. They were saved from the villain, certainly, but were they saved from homelessness? From destitution? The heroes moved on to the next photo opportunity, and that family was left in the crater of their salvation. As Loki spoke, the air in front of Midoriya shimmered. An image, as vivid and real as a window into another place, coalesced from the emerald light. Midoriya saw a sobbing mother, a grim-faced father, and a small child clutching a soot-stained teddy bear, standing before the wreckage of an apartment building. The scene was sickeningly familiar, pulled directly from a news report he'd seen. Or perhaps you mean the boy in Kyushu, Loki continued, his voice a hypnotic cadence. The one whose quirk manifested as the ability to cause metal to rust. A villainous quirk, his teachers called it. He was isolated, mocked, feared. The heroes never came for him. No one saved him from a childhood of loneliness and torment. So he finally lashed out, didn't he? And only then, when he had become the monster they all claimed he was, did a hero arrive to punch him into submission. Did they save him? Or did they merely validate the world's judgment? Another image appeared. A gaunt, hollow-eyed teenager, his hands glowing with a corrosive orange light, being slammed into a wall by a brightly costumed hero as onlookers cheered. Midoriya felt a pang of sickness. He remembered that incident, too. He had celebrated the hero's victory. He never once thought about the boy's story. You see, Loki said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, your hero's society is a meticulously crafted illusion. It doesn't save everyone. It chooses who is worthy of salvation. It creates victims as surely as it creates villains. It is a system that grinds people into neat little boxes, hero, villain, civilian, and punishes anyone who dares to step outside their designated role. You want to be its symbol? Its smiling figurehead? The images faded, leaving Midoriya trembling. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion and a dawning, creeping horror. Loki's words were poison, but they were coated in a honeyed truth he couldn't deny. He had seen the cracks. He had seen the people the heroes didn't, or couldn't, save. This was the curse. It wasn't simple mind control. It was a targeted assault on his very ideology. Loki wasn't telling him to be evil. He was showing him the evil inherent in the good he so desperately cherished. And deep within the recesses of his mind, a battle was being waged. The mindscape was a maelstrom. It was a vast, gray expanse, like the inside of a thundercloud moments before it breaks. There was no ground, no sky, only an endless, turbulent fog. Within this space, 8 faint, flickering lights drifted, the vestiges of one for all. They were faint, their forms indistinct, their voices like whispers on a storm wind. A golden, ethereal figure with wild hair, Nana Shimura, reached out. Izuku! Fight him! He's twisting your heart! Her voice was distorted, full of static. A broad-shouldered silhouette, the first user, stood defiant. This poison, it latches onto doubt. You must hold true to your conviction, ninth. But their voices were growing fainter. A thick, coiling fog of that same malevolent green was seeping into the mindscape, thick and oily. It wasn't just obscuring the vestiges. It was actively consuming the space. Midoriya's memories, which once floated like clear, crystalline islands in this space, were being enveloped by the fog. He saw the memory of his mother Inko, weeping with pride as she gave him his first hero costume. I'm so proud of you, Izuku! The green fog swirled around the memory, and the image warped. His mother's tears of pride became tears of terror. Her voice twisted into a fearful whisper. This path will kill you. You're so fragile. You'll die, and it will be for nothing. He saw the memory of All Might on the rooftop, bestowing the power upon him. You too can become a hero. The fog consumed it, and the scene soured. All Might's smile became a grimace of pity. His words echoed with a new, cruel meaning. You, the quirkless, worthless boy. Perhaps this power will finally make you into something. The vestiges fought back, their light flaring, but the green mist was insidious. It didn't meet them with force. It flowed around them, isolating them, poisoning the very memories that gave Midoriya his strength. The curse wasn't just a leash on his power, it was a blight on his soul. Back in the Asgardian hall, Midoriya was on his knees, clutching his head. No, stop, you're twisting everything. Am I? Loki asked softly, circling him like a patient predator. Or am I merely showing you the truth you've been too afraid to see? Look at your idol. Your symbol of peace. Loki waved a hand, and a new, massive illusion filled the hall. It was All Might in his true skeletal form. The sunken eyes, the cavernous cheekbones, the terrible, gaping wound on his side. Midoriya gasped. This was his most guarded secret, a vulnerability known to almost no one. He sells them a lie of invincibility, Loki said, his voice resonating with false sympathy. He smiles to hide the fact that he is broken, that he is dying. His entire symbol is built on a foundation of deception. A necessary lie, perhaps, to keep the masses docile. But a lie nonetheless. Is that what you aspire to be, Izuku Midoriya? Another beautiful, tragic lie, propping up a corrupt and crumbling wall? He knelt, bringing his face level with Midoriya's. His emerald eyes were intense, hypnotic. I am not offering you destruction. I am offering you liberation. Truth. The world as it is, not as the heroes pretend it to be. Order is an illusion. Rules are cages. Chaos. Chaos is the natural state. It is freedom. It is the crucible in which true strength is forged. Midoriya looked from the illusion of the broken All Might to the face of the god before him. The arguments, the poisoned memories, the undeniable logic of Loki's words, it was all too much. His defenses were crumbling. The shining fortress of his ideals was being dismantled, stone by stone. What do you want from me? Midoriya whispered, his voice hoarse with defeat. Loki's lips curved into a genuine, triumphant smile. I want you to be a symbol. But not a symbol of their lies. Be a symbol of truth. Show them the folly of their blind faith. Show them the weakness in their champions. Expose the rot in their precious society. You will not save them by holding their hands and reassuring them. You will save them by forcing them to open their eyes. You will be their reckoning. Their liberator. He stood up and gestured to a dark alcove. The shadows within retreated, revealing a mannequin. Draped upon it was a new costume. It was a world away from the bright, all-might-inspired jumpsuit his mother had made. This was a work of dark artistry. It was crafted from a material that seemed to drink the light, a deep, forest green that was almost black, interwoven with sleek, armored plates of the same obsidian-like material as the floor. Intricate lines of gold, the same hue as Loki's armor, traced the contours of the suit, forming subtle, runic patterns along the arms and torso. The bulky, rabbit ear-like cowl was gone, replaced by a streamlined, form-fitting hood that would shadow the upper half of his face. The familiar, clunky red boots were replaced by sleek, silent-soled black ones, and the gloves were thin but reinforced with the same golden metal at the knuckles. It was a suit designed not for a cheerful debutante, but for a swift, silent, and terrifyingly efficient predator. Your old uniform was a tribute, Loki said dismissively. A child's drawing. This is a statement. It will not tear when you channel your power. It will move with you, an extension of your will. The will I will teach you to master. He extended a hand to Midoriya. The power of one for all is a legacy of shackles. Each user passing on their burdens, their rules, their limitations to the next. That is why it breaks you. You are trying to fit your soul into the shape of 8 others. I will teach you to shatter the mold. To make the power truly yours. No more broken bones. No more reckless self-sacrifice. Only pure, focused, liberated power. Slowly, hesitantly, Midoriya looked at Loki's outstretched hand. His mind was a battlefield in its final, desperate throes. The whispers of the vestiges were almost gone now, drowned out by the hissing of the green fog and the resonant echo of Loki's promises. Liberation. Truth. No more broken bones. A power that is finally my own. It was a siren song to a soul that had known nothing but inadequacy and pain. The boy who was told he was worthless, the boy who had to shatter his own body to be a hero, was being offered a path to power without that pain. A path that, in its own twisted way, still felt like saving people. Saving them from the lie. With a shuddering breath that felt like his last as Deku, the useless hero wannabe, he took Loki's hand. The god's grip was firm and cool. A wise choice, Loki said, his eyes gleaming. An hour later, he stood before a full-length mirror that Loki had conjured from a sheet of shadow. The new suit fit like a second skin, the strange material cool and comfortable. He felt powerful, not just in a physical sense. He felt sleek, efficient, and unburdened. The weight of All Might's legacy, the pressure to smile even when terrified, felt distant, like a foolish dream he'd finally woken up from. He raised a gloved hand, and on instinct focused. He didn't reach for the warmth of one for all. He reached for the cold, serpentine energy that was now entwined with it. The result was instantaneous. Green lightning, his familiar signature, erupted around his body. But it was different. It was no longer a pure, vibrant green. It was now shot through with veins of that sinister, emerald magic. The two colors, the two energies, swirled together, a perfect, terrifying synthesis of heroic legacy and mischievous chaos. The power flowed through him without a hint of pain, without the threat of recoil. It was utterly, completely under his control. He looked at his reflection. The hood cast his eyes in deep shadow, but he could see them glowing faintly with that same mixed light. He lifted his head, allowing the emerald torchlight to fall upon his face. He saw his freckles, his youthful features, but the expression was all wrong. He smiled. It was not the wide, trembling, tearful smile of Izuku Midoriya. It was not the beaming, reassuring grin he had practiced for years in imitation of All Might. This smile was sharp. It was intelligent. It was confident, precise, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was the smile of a predator that has just spotted its prey. A smile that knew a secret, terrible and wonderful, that the rest of the world had yet to learn. It was a smile that promised not comfort, but chaos disguised as salvation. He saw the truth now. The heroes weren't saviors. They were glorified zookeepers, maintaining a fragile, beautiful cage. The villains were just angry children throwing rocks at the bars. Both were playing a foolish game with meaningless rules. He would not play. He would shatter the board. His reflection stared back, a perfect stranger wearing his face. The symbol of peace was a lie. He would become a new symbol. A symbol for the liberated. He turned from the mirror to face his new mentor, who was watching with an expression of immense, paternal pride. "I understand, Master Loki," Izuku Midoriya said, his voice steady and clear for the first time since he'd woken up. "It's time to save them from themselves." The sun over Muzidafu was a brilliant, declarative gold, a perfect celestial spotlight for the ceremony below. In the city's sprawling central plaza, thousands had gathered. The air, usually thick with the exhaust of hover cars and the general thrum of urban life, was instead buzzing with anticipation and the scent of street-vended takoyaki. Banners of red and gold fluttered from every lamppost, bearing the stern, fiery visage of the new number one hero, Endeavor. It was a performance, and everyone was playing their part. The mayor, a portly man with a perpetually nervous sweat on his brow, was playing the grateful civic leader. The media crews, a flock of vultures with cameras for eyes, were playing the adoring press. The crowd was playing the role of the reverent, secure public. And on the grandstand, flanked by the effortlessly cool number 2 hero, Hawks, Enji Todoroki was playing the part of the stoic, deserving champion, a role that fit him as comfortably as a suit of armor 2 sizes too small. Hidden within the throng, another was playing a part. Shoto Todoroki stood with his arms crossed, a pocket of icy stillness in the warm, bustling crowd. He had been strongly encouraged to attend, a command from his father delivered via a clipped, impersonal text message. "Your presence is required. It is a matter of family image." So here he was, a prop for the grand Todoroki narrative, watching the man who had forged his childhood into a crucible of pain be celebrated as a savior. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. And so, the mayor boomed, his voice amplified to fill the plaza, in recognition of his tireless service, his unwavering strength, and his commitment to a safer Japan in the wake of All Might's retirement. "The city of Muzidafu is proud to present this commemorative award to our pillar of flame, the number one hero, Endeavor." A wave of applause, genuine from some, perfunctory from others, swept through the crowd. A city official in a crisp suit approached Endeavor, carrying a plush velvet cushion. On it rested a newly minted medallion of gleaming platinum, sculpted into the shape of the city's seal, suspended from a thick, crimson ribbon. It was the apex of the charade, the physical manifestation of this hollow victory. Endeavor, his expression as rigid as stone, leaned forward slightly, allowing the mayor to lift the ribbon. Shoto watched, a familiar, bitter coldness settling in his gut. He saw Hawks give his father a subtle, encouraging nod, a gesture of camaraderie that felt utterly false. The whole world was a stage. The mayor began to loop the ribbon over Endeavor's head. And that's when the first note of discord was played in this carefully orchestrated symphony. The platinum medallion, inches from touching Endeavor's chest, flickered. For a barest fraction of a second, it seemed to lose its solidity, shimmering like a heat haze. The mayor paused, blinking. Endeavor narrowed his eyes, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Then, with a soft, liquid plink, the metal reshaped itself. The city seal melted away, the platinum flowing like mercury before solidifying into a new form. Hanging from the crimson ribbon now was not a symbol of civic pride, but a grotesque, grinning caricature. It was a classic jester's mask, split down the middle, one half weeping a single, exaggerated tear, the other locked in a wide, mocking smile. A gasp rippled through the front rows of the crowd. The media cameras, which had been focused for the perfect hero shot, now zoomed in on the absurd object hanging before the number one hero. The mayor snatched his hands back as if burned. "What is this mockery?" Endeavor roared, his voice cracking like a whip. His body temperature began to rise, steam coiling from his shoulders. "Oh, I wouldn't call it a mockery," a new voice said. It was light, calm, and laced with an unnerving, theatrical amusement. Think of it more as a correction, a more honest symbol for the performance being given today. Every head snapped towards the source of the voice. He was standing on the stage, leaning casually against the podium as if he'd been there all along. No one had seen him arrive. There had been no sound, no sudden movement. He was simply there. He was tall and lean, clad in a suit of dark, forest green and black that seemed to absorb the bright sunlight. Lines of burnished gold traced the contours of his arms and torso, gleaming with a subtle, internal light. His face was obscured by a deep hood, casting his features in shadow, but there was no mistaking the smile. It was a sharp, intelligent, utterly cruel slash of white in the darkness of the cowl. It was a smile that belonged on a wolf that had just cornered its prey. Panic began its slow, coiling dance through the crowd. Who was this? A villain? His costume wasn't garish or haphazard, it was sleek, professional. He carried no obvious weapon, he just stood there, radiating an aura of absolute, unassailable confidence. Hawks was the first to react, his casual demeanor vanishing in an instant, replaced by a razor-sharp focus. A dozen of his crimson feathers detached from his wings, hardening into deadly blades as they shot towards the intruder. "You've got 5 seconds to explain who you are before things get messy," he said, his voice dangerously level. The hooded figure simply chuckled. He raised a gloved hand, not in defense, but in a gesture of welcome. The feathers, moments from piercing him, abruptly stopped in midair. Their hardened, blade-like edges softened. Their crimson color paled to a pure, brilliant white. And then, with a flutter of movement, they transformed. A dozen white doves, symbols of peace, now hovered in the air where deadly weapons had been a moment before. They cooed softly and scattered, flying out over the stunned, silent crowd. "Such a hostile welcome, number 2, the stranger chided, his smile widening. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to educate. To pull back the curtain on this wonderful piece of theater you call Heroes Society." From his place in the crowd, Shoto felt a jolt. Not of fear, but of a chilling, impossible recognition. The way the figure stood, his weight balanced perfectly on the balls of his feet, the lean, powerful build beneath the suit. It was familiar. Terribly familiar. Endeavor had seen enough. With a bellow of pure rage, he unleashed a torrent of fire, a roaring jet of incandescent flame that should have incinerated the man and the entire stage with him. Insolent wretch, the hooded man didn't even flinch. Just as the flames were about to engulf him, he vanished. Not in a burst of speed, but with a blink-can-you'll-miss-it ripple of green energy. The fireball roared past the empty space where he'd stood, slamming into the grand fountain behind the stage. The water flash boiled into a massive cloud of steam, and for a moment, the stage was obscured. When the steam cleared, he was back, now perched atop the podium, one leg crossed over the other in a pose of casual insolence. Temper, number 1, he taunted. All that power, and so little finesse. You see? This is what I mean. You heroes deal in brute force. In spectacle. You punch the problem until it stops moving. But you never ask why the problem exists in the first place. The media had a name for him now. As a junior reporter, live on the air, tried to describe the scene, the words tumbled out. A new villain, a trickster of some kind, with a terrifying, jester-like smile. The name stuck. In that moment, across millions of screens, the villain jester was born. The crowd was a mixture of terror and morbid fascination. This wasn't like a typical villain attack. There was no destruction, no demands for money. It was a targeted, psychological assault. Jester wasn't trying to level the city. He was trying to dismantle its faith. You speak of problems? Endeavor snarled, preparing another, larger attack. You are the only problem I see here, am I? Jester tilted his head, the movement bird-like and inquisitive. Let's ask the audience. He snapped his fingers. Across the plaza, the confetti cannons, which had been prepared for the ceremony's triumphant conclusion, fired prematurely. But instead of colored paper, what rained down upon the crowd were thousands of small, glossy flyers. Shoto caught one as it fluttered down. His blood ran cold. It was a miniature version of one of Endeavor's official hero posters. But the text had been altered. The slogan "The Flame of Justice" was crossed out, and scrawled beneath it in elegant, mocking script were the words, "The Fire of Ambition, Forged in Pain." On the back was a single, cryptic question: how many children does it take to create a number 1 hero? A low murmur went through the crowd as thousands of people read the same words. It was confusing, insidious. A seed of doubt planted in the heart of a celebration. Enough games. Hawks launched himself into the air, wings beating powerfully, as Endeavor gathered flames for a massive area of effect attack. Jester sighed, a sound of theatrical disappointment. Very well. If you insist on the crude, physical approach. He dropped from the podium, landing in a light crouch. Green lightning, crackling and fierce, erupted around his body. But woven within it, Shoto could now clearly see it, a second, darker green, a sinister, emerald energy that coiled around the familiar lightning like a serpent, and Shoto knew, the world tilted on its axis. The roar of the crowd, the frantic shouts of the heroes, faded into a dull drone in his ears. The green lightning. The stance. The way he moved. It was impossible. It was madness, but it was him. Midoriya. Jester moved. He was a blur of dark green and black, a phantom weaving through the chaos. He didn't meet Endeavor's power with his own. He used his speed, the terrifying, overwhelming speed of One for All, with a precision Shoto had never seen. He flowed around Endeavor's attacks, the gouts of flame licking at empty air. With each dodge he would blip, teleporting a few feet to the left or right in a flicker of that same emerald magic, making him utterly unpredictable. He appeared behind Hawks in midair, not to attack, but to tap him gently on the shoulder. Hawks spun, sword feathers ready, but Jester was already gone, reappearing on the other side of the stage with a chuckle. He wasn't fighting them. He was toying with them. He was proving, with every effortless movement, that their power was irrelevant. You see? Jester's voice echoed, seeming to come from several places at once, another of his tricks. Power is not the answer. Strength is not the solution, because your strength is built on a foundation of lies. And lies, well, lies are so very fragile. He clapped his hands together once. A sharp, echoing sound, and the world broke. The giant screen surrounding the plaza, which had been broadcasting Endeavor's stern face, flickered and changed. The corporate logos and news feeds vanished, replaced by a grainy, home video quality image. It was the Todoroki training dojo. A younger Endeavor, his face a mask of terrifying fury, stood over a small, weeping child. A child with half-red, half-white hair. A 5-year-old Shoto. Get up! The apparition of Endeavor roared, the sound tinny but clear, broadcast across the entire plaza. The symbol of peace does not cry. He does not vomit from exertion. You will surpass him. You will. The image showed Endeavor grabbing the small boy by the arm, dragging him back to his feet. Shoto stopped breathing. His private hell, the buried memories he had spent his entire life trying to forget, were now being projected 20 feet high for the world to see. The murmuring of the crowd died instantly, replaced by a collective, horrified silence. The scene on the screen shifted. Now it showed a slightly older boy with white hair, his body covered in angry, weeping burns. Tuya. He was screaming, not in pain, but in desperate defiance. Look at me, father! My fire is stronger than yours. It's stronger. The image of Endeavor turned away from him, his expression one of cold dismissal. You are a failure. A flawed creation. Shame and horror washed over Shoto in a paralyzing wave. He felt thousands of eyes on him, connecting the crying child on the screen to the stoic Yui student in the crowd. He was naked, his scars, both physical and emotional, laid bare for public consumption. The final projection was the most damning. It showed his mother, Rei Todoroki, on the phone, her voice a frantic, broken whisper. I can't take it anymore. The children, every day they become more and more like him. Shoto's left side, sometimes I look at it, and it's unbearable. Then, the image of her standing over him, a kettle in her hand, her eyes wide with a terror that mirrored his own. The screens went black. Silence. A profound, tomb-like silence descended upon the central plaza. The only sound was the gentle cooing of the white doves as they settled on the statues and fountains. No one was looking at the stage anymore. Every eye was on Endeavor. The number one hero stood frozen, his flames extinguished. The fury was gone, replaced by a look of stark, raw shock. His ambition, his sins, his family's agony, all of it had been weaponized and used against him in the most public way imaginable. He was defeated. Not by a punch, not by a blast of power, but by the truth, his own truth. Jester stood calmly in the center of the stage, the architect of this devastation. He had not thrown a single punch. The symbol of peace now serves the god of mischief, he said, his voice soft, yet carrying across the silent plaza. It was a formal declaration. A mission statement. He then turned his hooded head, and through the shadows, Shoto felt Jester's gaze lock onto his. Even from this distance, he could feel the weight of it. It was not a look of malice or triumph. It was something far more chilling. It was pity. Jester raised a gloved hand and gave Shoto a slow, deliberate wink. A gesture that said, I know. I see your cage. And I have just given you the key. Then, with a final, cutting smile, his body dissolved. He didn't run or fly. He simply unraveled, breaking apart into a swirling vortex of green and black energy, which shot upwards into the sky and vanished without a trace. For a long moment, the plaza remained frozen. Then chaos erupted. The media, smelling the biggest story of the decade, surged forward, microphones and cameras thrust towards the stage, their questions a frantic, barking wall of sound. Endeavor, are those allegations true? What is your response to these images? Who was that villain? Is the Todoroki family a lie? Hawks landed silently beside Endeavor, his expression unreadable. He looked at the broken man, then at the sky where the villain had vanished. The easygoing persona was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating mind of an intelligence agent facing an entirely new kind of threat. But Shoto didn't see any of that. He was still locked in place, the ghost of that pitying wink burned into his retinas. He felt sick. He felt liberated. He felt a profound, soul-deep terror. The man who had exposed his family's darkest secrets, the man who had brought the number one hero to his knees without landing a blow, the trickster who played with heroes as if they were toys, was the kindest, most heroic boy he had ever known. He lowered the flyer from his trembling hand, his knuckles white. There was no more doubt. No more impossibility. Only a single, horrifying certainty that settled in his heart like a shard of ice. Midoriya. The news report played on the large flat screen in the Class 1A dormitory common room, a morbid beacon in the tense, suffocating silence. The footage was on a continuous loop across every major channel. The grinning jester mask made of platinum, the flock of white doves, the terrifying ease with which the villain jester had dismantled the two strongest heroes in Japan. But it was the final part of the loop that held every student of Class 1A in a vice grip of disbelief. The enhanced audio analysis. The digital lip reading of the villain's final pronouncement. The side-by-side comparison. On the left, grainy cell phone footage from the sports festival of Izuku Midoriya, his face grim with determination, declaring his intent to a scowling Shoto Todoroki. On the right, the hooded visage of Jester, his cruel smile visible in the shadows, uttering his mission statement. The voice print analysis flashed on screen, a 99.8% match. The facial recognition software, mapping the visible lower half of Jester's face, the chin, the jawline, the scatter of freckles, came back with a single, undeniable result: Midoriya, Izuku. The report ended, and the screen cut back to a panel of shell-shocked commentators. No one in the common room moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ragged, shallow breathing of 20 teenagers whose world had just been torn from its foundations. Achiko Uraraka was staring at her own hands, clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white mountains on a pale landscape. Her mind refused to process it. Deku. Her Deku. The boy who trembled and cried but always stood up for others. The boy whose frantic, selfless heroism had inspired her to be better, to push past her own limits. The boy who had saved her from the zero-pointer robot without a thought for his own safety. That boy could not be this monster. This cold, calculating villain who used people's trauma as a weapon. It was a contradiction so profound it felt like a physical law of the universe had been broken. Next to her, Tenya Ida sat ramrod straight, his hands planted firmly on his knees, his expression a mask of stony horror. His entire worldview was built on a framework of rules, order, and the clear, delineated line between good and evil. Heroes upheld the law. Villains broke it. It was simple. It was the foundation of the society his family had served for generations. But Jester hadn't just broken the law. He had taken the very concept of order and twisted it into a pretzel. He had used truth as an act of terrorism. And the fact that this agent of philosophical chaos was his friend, the earnest, rule-abiding Midoriya. Ida's internal processors were screaming, finding no logical box in which to place this impossible data. The silence was finally, violently shattered. Liars! The roar came from Katsuki Bakugo, who had been standing by the window, his back to the television, staring out at the setting sun as if he could incinerate it with his gaze alone. He whirled around, his face a contorted mask of pure, incandescent rage. His hands sparked and popped, miniature explosions erupting from his palms, filling the air with the smell of nitroglycerin. It's a trick! It's some goddamn shapeshifter! A body double! There is no fucking way! He stabbed a trembling finger at the screen, at the face of his childhood friend turned rival. That shitty nerd, that damn Deku, he's too much of a goddamn moron to be a villain. All he knows how to do is cry and break his own bones trying to save people. He doesn't have the guts to be this thing. His denial was a physical force, a wall of explosive fury meant to hold the horrifying truth at bay. But his eyes, wide and frantic, betrayed him. They were filled not just with anger, but with a deep, primal fear. The fear of a world that no longer made sense. The Deku he knew was a pebble in his shoe, a constant, annoying presence he was destined to surpass. He was a measuring stick. A weakling who had somehow stumbled into power. He was a problem Bakugo knew how to solve, with overwhelming force. This jester, this cunning, untouchable phantom, he was an equation with no answer. Bakugo, the evidence. Yaoyorozu started, her voice trembling, but he cut her off. The evidence is bullshit! He screamed, kicking a nearby ottoman and sending it tumbling across the room. I'll prove it! I'll find that weakling and I'll beat the goddamn stupid out of him until he remembers he's supposed to be a hero. I'll be the one to drag him back. His words were a promise of violence, but beneath them lay a desperate, twisted vow of salvation. It was the only way Bakugo knew how to fix things. The only way he knew how to save someone, not with words of comfort, but with a punch strong enough to shatter the illusion. The heavy doors to the common room slid open. Shota Aizawa stood there, his face grim, his eyes tired and red-rimmed. Behind him were Principal Nizu and a gaunt, skeletal figure that made everyone's breath catch in their throat. All Might, in his true form, looked like a ghost haunting his own legacy. He leaned heavily on the doorframe, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his students, each one a testament to his failure. The dorms are now on a level 3 lockdown, Aizawa announced, his voice flat and devoid of its usual lethargy. It was heavy, weighted with authority and exhaustion. No one leaves the building without a faculty escort. All classes are suspended until further notice. This is not a punishment. It is for your own protection. Protection from what? Kirishima asked, his usual boisterous energy completely gone. From Midoriya? The name felt like acid on his tongue. Aizawa's jaw tightened. We don't know what we're dealing with. The villain who calls himself Jester possesses Midoriya's quirk, his face, and his knowledge. But his methods, his power signature, it's something new. Something alien. He glanced at All Might. Until we understand the nature of the threat, every one of you is a potential target. He knows you. He knows your strengths, your weaknesses. He knows your secrets. That last sentence landed like a physical blow, sending a fresh wave of chills through the room. They all thought of their conversations with Midoriya, the shared strategies, the quiet confessions of insecurity, the moments of vulnerability. All of that was now potential ammunition for a villain's arsenal. They were compromised. He is not himself, a new voice said. It was Shoto, who had been silent until now, a pillar of ice in the corner of the room. He spoke with a chilling certainty that cut through Bakugo's rage and Uraraka's denial. I was there. I saw him. The power he uses, it's not just one for all. It's twisted. Corrupted. Someone is controlling him. All Might finally spoke, and his voice was a thin, rattling whisper, a pale imitation of his heroic boom. Young Todoroki is correct. He straightened up, a pained effort, and took a shuffling step into the room. The sight of their invincible symbol so broken and frail was more terrifying than any news report. What happened at the USJ? It wasn't just the League of Villains, he began, his eyes vacant, staring at a memory only he could see. As I fought the Nomu, our clashing energies, they tore a hole. A rift. And someone, came through. He described the figure, the man in black and gold, Loki. He recounted the final moments. The plus-ultra punch, the cloud of dust, the strange, cold mark left on the ground where his successor had vanished. This Loki, he placed a curse on young Midoriya, All Might finished, his voice cracking. The word curse hung in the air, ancient and absurd in their world of quirks and science. It is not brainwashing in a way we understand. It seems to be a form of spiritual and ideological poison. It has inverted him. It has twisted his desire to save into a desire to liberate through chaos. The weight of his guilt was a palpable thing, a shroud that seemed to suffocate the room. He had given this boy the sacred torch, a power meant to bring hope, and it had been stolen, its light perverted into a beacon for a god of mischief. It was his fault. His burden. His failure. So, Deku-kun, he's a victim? Uraraka asked, a fragile sliver of hope in her voice. The tears she had been holding back finally began to fall, tracing silent paths down her flushed cheeks. He's still in there somewhere? All Might looked at her, and for the first time, a flicker of the old hero returned to his eyes, a spark of desperate resolve. I believe so. We have to believe so. The Midoriya you know, the boy who would shatter his own body to save another, his spirit is a fire that cannot be so easily extinguished. We have to believe it's still burning, buried under this curse. He looked around at the faces of Class 1A. He saw despair, anger, confusion. But he also saw loyalty. He saw the bonds of friendship that had been forged in the fires of the USJ, the training camp, the Kamino incident. We will bring him home, All Might vowed, his voice gaining a sliver of its old strength. But this is not a battle you can fight with your fists. This is a battle for a soul, and it will be fought by us, the faculty. Your only responsibility is to stay safe. The students were dismissed to their rooms. The common area, once a hub of laughter and camaraderie, felt like a wake. Small groups huddled together, speaking in hushed whispers. Uraraka and Ida stood with Tsuyu, Yayorozu, and Kirishima, a small faction united by the desperate belief that their friend was a prisoner in his own body. They refused to accept that Izuku Midoriya was truly gone. There has to be a way to break it, Uraraka insisted, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. If it's a curse, like something from a fantasy story, there's always a weakness, right? A loophole? Indeed, Ida said, pushing his glasses up his nose, his analytical mind latching onto this new framework. In classic mythology, curses are often broken by an act of true love, a shocking revelation, or an object of immense personal significance. We must consider every possibility. This is all very manly talk, Kirishima said, slamming a hardened fist into his palm, but All Might said to stand down. How can we just sit here and do nothing while Midobro is like that? Their hushed strategizing was a stark contrast to the storm brewing in another part of the dorms. Bakugo's room was a disaster zone. A scorch mark marred the wall where he'd blasted it in a fit of rage. His desk was overturned, his All Might posters torn from their moorings. He was on the floor, doing push-ups with a frantic, punishing intensity, sweat dripping from his brow and sizzling on the floorboards. 101. 102. 103. He wasn't just training his body. He was trying to exorcise the thoughts from his head with sheer physical exhaustion. Deku, the villain. It was a discordant chord that rang in his ears, refusing to resolve. The Deku he knew was a shadow, a reflection against which he measured his own brilliance. Quirkless. Useless. A pebble. An admirer. A rival. A friend? The thought was unwelcome, but it flickered in the back of his mind, a memory of two small boys in a creek, dreaming of being heroes like All Might. He remembered Deku's face after Kamino, when he'd cried and said Bakugo's own words back to him, save to win, win to save. He remembered the look of pure, unadulterated awe on the nerd's face whenever All Might did something amazing. That admiration, that burning, idiotic purity, was the core of who Deku was. It couldn't just be erased. He winked at Icy Hot. That detail from the news report gnawed at him. The cold, calculated cruelty of it. Exposing someone's darkest trauma for the world to see and then having the audacity to wink. That wasn't Deku. Deku would have thrown himself in front of a bus to protect someone's feelings. This jester, he took feelings and sharpened them into knives. I'll kill him, Bakugo growled to the floor, his voice raw. He didn't mean jester. He meant Loki. This faceless god who had dared to take his rival, to warp him into this puppet. It was the ultimate insult. It was as if someone had stolen his final exam, the one he had been studying his whole life to ace. The redemption arc, the moment where he would finally, definitively prove his superiority over Deku and drag him up to his level, had been stolen. He pushed himself up, his muscles screaming. His rage was afire, but now it had a focus. It wasn't just about being number one anymore. It was about reclaiming what was stolen. He wouldn't just beat Deku, he would beat the curse out of him. He would punch him so hard that the damn god on the other side of reality would feel it. He stormed out of his room and headed for the training gyms, ignoring the lockdown, ignoring the teachers. He had a promise to keep. Meanwhile, in the UA faculty lounge, the atmosphere was grim. The teachers sat around a large table, the file for Izuku Midoriya projected on the central monitor. His smiling student ID photo felt like a cruel joke. The commission is in chaos, Nisa said, his furry paws steepled before him. Endeavor has been secluded, refusing to make a public statement. Public trust in heroes has plummeted overnight more than it did after All Might's retirement. Jester didn't just attack a hero, he attacked the idea of heroes. And he did it with my power, All Might whispered, staring at his own skeletal hands. The guilt was a physical entity. A gnome was sitting on his chest, squeezing the air from his lungs. I gave the boy a loaded gun, and this Loki pulled the trigger. This is not your fault, Tashinori, Recovery Girl chided gently from her chair. You could not have foreseen an attack from a literal god, couldn't I? All Might countered, his voice full of self-loathing. One for All is a unique power. It has a will, a spirit. I should have known it would act as a beacon. I became so focused on the threat of All for One that I never looked up, to see what other predators might be circling. He looked at Aizawa. What did you find? Aizawa slid a tablet across the table. On it was a hastily compiled file on Norse mythology, cross-referenced with historical accounts of cults and anomalous energy readings from around the world. Loki, the trickster god. A shapeshifter, a master of magic and deceit. In every myth, his goal is the same. To subvert the established order, to sow discord not through open warfare, but through clever manipulation. He doesn't burn the castle down. He convinces the king his crown is a fake and lets the kingdom tear itself apart. It fits the psychological profile perfectly. Hound Dog growled from his seat. Jester's attack on Endeavor was a masterclass in psychological warfare. He targeted the symbol's foundation and shattered it. All Might scrolled through the file, his eyes landing on a passage. It described Loki as a silver-tongued manipulator, capable of weaving lies that contained just enough truth to be utterly believable. He preyed on doubt, on insecurity, on ambition. He didn't break minds, he gently guided them down a path they were already inclined to walk. He thought of young Midoriya. The boy's desperation to be a hero. His crippling self-doubt from a quirkless childhood. His analytical mind, which already saw the flaws and inefficiencies in the hero world. Loki hadn't just placed a curse. He had found the most fertile soil imaginable, and planted a seed of pure poison. Aizawa spoke again, his voice heavy. There's more. I've been reviewing Midoriya's notebooks, the ones we have on file. His analysis is brilliant. Frighteningly so. He's detailed the weaknesses of nearly every pro-hero and every student in this school. Not just their quirks, but their psychological profiles. Their fears, their motivations. He looked up, his gaze meeting All Might's. In Jester's hands, those notebooks aren't analysis. They're a war plan. The true, horrifying scope of the situation finally settled over the room. Izuku Midoriya, the kindest, most hopeful student UA had ever seen, had just become the single greatest threat to the hero society he had once worshipped. He was a weapon of mass deconstruction, armed with the power of All Might, the mind of a master strategist, and the soul of a hero, now inverted and aimed directly at the heart of everything they held dear. All Might closed his eyes, the image of his successor's smiling face burning behind his lids. He coughed, a racking, painful spasm that brought a speck of blood to his lips. The despair was a physical ailment, aggravating his old wound. But as he wiped his mouth, the despair hardened into a grim, unyielding resolve. This was his burden to bear. All for One had taken his stomach. This new villain, this Loki, had taken his son. The score was not settled. He would not die in a bed. He would face this. He would face the monster he had helped create. A confrontation was inevitable. And for the first time since his fight with All for One, Toshinori Yagi was truly afraid that he would not be strong enough to win. The headquarters of the Hero Public Safety Commission was a monument to order. It was a sterile, imposing ziggurat of smoked glass and steel that stabbed into the Musidifus skyline, deliberately designed to be featureless and unassailable. Within its walls, the chaotic, messy business of heroism was sanitized, codified, and controlled. It was the brain of the hero world, a place of secrets and shadows where the black and white morality sold to the public was rendered in 1,000 shades of pragmatic gray. Kill orders were quietly sanctioned, collateral damage reports were adjusted, and the public images of heroes were sculpted with the precision of a master artist. It was the beating, bureaucratic heart of the lie Jester had sworn to expose. And it was his next target. Inside, on the 47th floor, President Shiho Yakumura presided over an emergency meeting. She was a woman carved from ice. Her severe black suit and perfectly coiffed hair a suit of armor against the chaos her world had been plunged into. Flanking her were the Commission's top brass and the holographic images of several pro-heroes, their faces grim. On the main screen was the frozen, smiling face of Jester. Our analysts are unanimous, a grim-faced man in a suit reported, gesturing to the screen. The power signature is a near-perfect match for All Might's, but it's contaminated. The secondary energy reading is something we've never encountered. It doesn't conform to any known quirk factor. It behaves more like a computer virus rewriting his base code. And his objective? Yakumura asked, her voice sharp and brittle. Anarcho-primitivism is the closest ideology we can match, the analyst replied. He's not a destroyer like Shigaraki or a crusader like Stain. He's a deconstructionist. He's targeting the systems of our society. Endeavor was the symbolic pillar. His next logical target. He didn't need to finish. Every person in the room knew. Their building, their entire organization, was the next pillar on his list. Security is at maximum, the head of security barked. No one gets in or out without triple verification. Every system is firewalled, every entrance guarded. We have Edge Shot, Kamui Woods, and Bastionist on standby within the building. Let him try. President Yakumura looked at the confident face of her security chief and felt a sliver of cold dread. They were preparing for a physical assault, a frontal attack. They were preparing for a villain. But Jester wasn't a villain. He was an idea. And you couldn't stop an idea with a locked door. Tenya Ida was not handling the lockdown well. His entire life had been a structured progression of rules and routines. Wake up at 6 a.m. sharp. Morning run. Nutritious breakfast. School. Training. Homework. Sleep. Repeat. This forced inactivity, this helpless waiting, was like a cage for his ordered mind. He found himself pacing the length of his meticulously tidy room, the path between his desk and his bed becoming a well-worn track of anxiety. He couldn't stop thinking about Midoriya. His friend. His classmate. The boy who had charged into Hosa City to save him, breaking every rule to do the right thing. Ida had chastised him for it then, for his reckless disregard for protocol. He had seen it as a flaw, a dangerous impulsiveness. Now, that same disregard for rules was being wielded with terrifying precision, not to save one person, but to tear down the entire system Ida had sworn to uphold. He sat at his desk, staring at a framed photo of his older brother, Tensei. Ingenium. A hero who had lived and nearly died by the rules. He had been a perfect hero, a pillar of his community, and for his trouble, his career had been ended by the hero killer, a man who also believed the system was rotten. The parallels were sickening. Stain had used blades. Jester used truth. Ida wasn't sure which was sharper. His phone buzzed. It was a notification from a secure Hero Network channel, one only licensed heroes and students in the Hero course had access to. The message was simple, stark, and sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through him. HPSC HQ under attack. Code Jester. All available heroes respond. Ida shot to his feet, his heart hammering. He was a student. He was on lockdown. His duty was to stay put. The rules were clear. But Midoriya, his friend, was at the heart of that chaos. He was torn between the rigid conditioning of his entire life and the desperate, illogical urge to go, to see, to understand. He gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles white, his mind a war zone of duty and desperation. The attack on the HPSC did not begin with an explosion. It began with a drip. On the massive, multi-story digital billboard across the street from the Commission's headquarters, the smiling face of a model advertising a new brand of energy drink flickered. Her perfect teeth dissolved, her eyes turned into spinning spirals, and her voice, pitching up into a mocking, cartoonish squeal, began to read from a document. HPSC Internal Memo 77B. Subject: The Hosu Incident. Finding: Pro-Hero Endeavor's unsanctioned use of devastating force resulted in 14 million yen in property damage and 3 civilian injuries. Recommendation: publicly award Endeavor with a medal for his swift resolution of the crisis to maintain public confidence. Privately bill the city for damages. The crowd of onlookers on the street below stopped and stared. A few blocks away, another billboard, this one advertising vacation packages, switched to a new image, a heavily redacted document with a red classified stamp. The redacted bars began to dissolve, revealing the text underneath. Operation Clean Sweep. Target: the Creature Rejection Clan. Status: terminated. Official report: targets neutralized during a villainous altercation. Actual report: covert assassination of a peaceful, anti-hero political group sanctioned by President Yukimaru. It was a slow, creeping informational plague. All across the city, on every screen connected to the network, billboards, ATMs, the little TVs in the back of taxi cabs, the HPSC's darkest secrets were being laid bare. It wasn't a data dump, a chaotic flood of information. It was a curated exhibition. Each leak was chosen for maximum ideological damage, a perfectly aimed dart at the heart of the Commission's carefully crafted image of benevolent authority. Inside the HPSC, chaos reigned. Shut it down! Shut down the external network! An IT technician screamed, his fingers flying across a keyboard. I can't! He's not hacking us from the outside. The broadcast signal is originating from inside the building. President Yukimaru's face was a pale, marble mask. He's here. Impossible! The security chief roared. My men are on every floor. As if on cue, the lights in the command center flickered and died, plunging the room into the dim, red glow of the emergency backup system. Every screen went black, save for one. The main monitor flickered to life, showing not a document, but a live feed. It was a high-angle shot of the building's pristine, white lobby, and standing in the center of the lobby, looking up at a security camera with a knowing smile, was Jester. The security guards stationed in the lobby lay on the floor around him. They weren't dead or bloody. They were asleep. Each one was curled up on the polished marble, snoring softly, a small, cartoonish sea projected in green light above their heads. How did he get past the door? Someone whispered in the darkened command center. On the screen, Jester raised a hand and waggled a small, rectangular object at the camera. A keycard. Not a copy. An original, belonging to a mid-level accounting drone named Kenji Tanaka. The camera feed switched to a pre-recorded video. It showed Kenji Tanaka walking home the previous evening. Jester, a blur of motion, zipped past him, bumping his shoulder. So sorry, Jester's voice said, as he helped the flustered man pick up his dropped briefcase. In that brief, 2-second interaction, Jester had lifted the man's keycard, wallet, and a half-eaten protein bar with the sleight of hand of a master magician. The video then showed Jester, using a small, shimmering illusion to alter his facial features to perfectly match Tanaka's ID photo, striding through the front security checkpoint an hour before the attack began. He hadn't broken in. He'd been invited. He's been playing with us this entire time, Yakumura breathed, the first crack appearing in her icy composure. On the screen, the live feed returned. Jester gave a mock bow. Ladies and gentlemen of the Commission, his amplified voice echoed through the lobby's PA system. Welcome to the first day of your liberation. You have spent decades building a cage of rules and calling it a society. You have traded freedom for the illusion of safety. Today, the illusion ends. The heroes mobilized. He's in the lobby. Go! Kamui Woods, Edge Shot, and Best Jeanist converged on the location, moving with the swift, deadly efficiency of the nation's top heroes. Kamui extended his arm in a cascade of splintering wood, forming a cage of lacquered chain prison. Edge Shot folded his body, becoming a paper-thin spear, shooting through the air to strike a pressure point. Best Jeanist, ever the professional, began to manipulate the very fibers of Jester's costume, intending to constrict and incapacitate him. It was a perfect, coordinated attack. And it failed spectacularly. Jester laughed, a sound of pure delight. Kamui's wooden prison slammed shut on empty air. Jester had blipped, vanishing in a swirl of green energy, and reappearing 10 feet to the left. The fibers of his suit, which Best Jeanist was trying to control, refused to obey, infused with Loki's alien magic. They writhed and fought against the hero's quirk like living things. Oh, I'm sorry, Jester said, his voice dripping with condescension. Did you think I would wear something so suggestible? Edgeshot's attack was the closest to succeeding. He unfolded from his folded body form right behind Jester, his hand aimed for the nerve cluster at the base of the neck. But Jester moved with a preternatural awareness, pivoting not with speed, but with an impossible fluidity. He caught Edgeshot's wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. For a moment, the two were locked in place. The green lightning of One for All, intertwined with Loki's magic, crackled around Jester's arm. He wasn't using its full power, he was using it with the surgical precision of a scalpel. A controlled burst of energy, no more than 3%, pulsed into Edgeshot's arm. The hero gasped, his body seizing up as the foreign energy overloaded his nervous system. He collapsed, his body temporarily paralyzed, his quirk disabled. Such a shame, Jester tooted, looking down at the fallen hero. To be able to make yourself so thin, and yet your thinking remains so one-dimensional. He then turned to face Kamui Woods and Best Jeanist. He clapped his hands together, and the entire lobby warped. The pristine white marble floor rippled like water, turning into a field of tall, swaying grass. The steel support columns transformed into ancient, gnarled oak trees. The ceiling dissolved, revealing a star-filled night sky. It was an illusion, but it was so perfect, so complete, that it assaulted the senses. Kamui Woods faltered, his wood-based quirk going haywire as it tried to connect with the illusory trees. Best Jeanist, a man who thrived in urban environments, was suddenly adrift in a phantom wilderness. You see, Jester's voice echoed from the illusory forest, you are masters of your chosen environments. Your rules. But here, in my world, your rules don't apply. From the edge of the chaos, a crowd of UA students had arrived. Against direct orders, Ida, Uraraka, Bakugo, and several others had come, unable to stay away. They arrived just in time to see the nation's top heroes being utterly, helplessly outmaneuvered. Ida watched, his mind reeling. Midoriya, Jester, wasn't just fighting them. He was teaching them. He was systematically dismantling their strengths and exposing their weaknesses with a terrifying, analytical cruelty. This wasn't a brawl. It was a lecture. Jester emerged from the illusory trees, walking calmly towards Best Jeanist. You, for example. The Fiber Master. You believe control is strength. You bind, you constrict, you force everything to conform to your will. He gestured, and the illusion around them sharpened. They were no longer in a forest, but in a vast, empty room filled with looms, each one weaving a drab, gray tapestry. You are not a hero. You are a weaver of cages. He then turned his hooded gaze towards the entrance, where the students were standing, frozen in horror. His eyes, glowing faintly in the cowl's shadow, locked onto Ida. In a flicker of green energy, Jester was gone from the center of the room and standing directly in front of Ida. The other students recoiled, but Ida was frozen, pinned by that intense, familiar yet alien gaze. Tenya Ida, Jester said, his voice losing its mocking tone, becoming something softer, more intimate, and infinitely more poisonous. The class president. The ultimate believer in rules. Tell me, how did the rules help your brother? Ida flinched as if struck. The question was a scalpel, slipped expertly between his ribs to pierce his heart. He followed every law. He filed every piece of paperwork. He was a model hero, a perfect cog in your perfect machine, Jester continued, circling him slowly. And for his devotion, the hero-killer stain broke him. The rules didn't protect him. The system didn't save him. They just provided the framework for his martyrdom. You're wrong, Ida choked out, his voice trembling. The rules, the law, it's what separates us from you. Jester stopped in front of him again, tilting his head. Is it? I'm not breaking any laws right now. I haven't stolen anything. I haven't killed anyone. I'm merely sharing information. Disseminating truth. Isn't that what a free society is built on? Or are there rules against telling the truth, too? He leaned in closer, his voice a hypnotic whisper. Your brother was shackled by these rules, Tenya. His potential was capped by protocol. Imagine what he could have done if he was truly free. Imagine what you could do. His gloved hand rested gently on Ida's shoulder, on the cool metal of his hero costume's armor. I'm not offering you chaos. I'm offering you freedom. For a horrifying, split second, Ida understood. He saw the allure. The temptation to cast off the immense weight of his family's legacy, the suffocating burden of the rulebook, and just act. The path Jester offered was a dark and terrifying one, but it was paved with a seductive, absolute liberty. It was Bakugo who broke the spell. DKU! He roared, blasting forward with a series of explosions, his face a mask of pure fury. Get your damn hands off him, Jester sighed, pulling his hand back from Ida's shoulder as if bored by the interruption. He turned to face the oncoming rage. Ah, Kaken. Always the hammer, looking for a nail. Bakugo didn't waste time with words. He unleashed his signature move, the AP shot, focusing his explosion into a concentrated, armor-piercing beam. It was fast, powerful, and precise. Jester simply raised a hand. A shimmering, green barrier, shaped like a complex Norse rune, materialized in front of him. Bakugo's blast hit the shield and dissipated harmlessly, the kinetic energy absorbed and scattered as a shower of harmless, glittering emerald sparks. Bakugo's eyes widened in shock. No one had ever blocked his AP shot so casually. Predictable, Jester said with a yawn. All that power, all that rage. It makes you so wonderfully easy to read. You lead with your right, you always faint after a major blast, and your anger makes you blind to your surroundings. As he spoke, he made a subtle gesture with his free hand. Bakugo roared and launched himself forward again, but his feet suddenly stuck to the floor. He looked down to see the polished marble had been transmuted into a thick, incredibly sticky, bubblegum pink substance. He was trapped. What the hell is this? He bellowed, struggling against the adhesive. The rules of reality are so much more fun to play with than the rules of society, don't you think? Jester chuckled. He turned his back on the struggling Bakugo, dismissing him as a non-threat. He surveyed the scene, the heroes incapacitated, the students in shock, the HPSC's authority in tatters. His work here was done. The grand illusions faded, returning the lobby to its sterile, white reality. The security guards began to stir, groaning as they woke from their enchanted slumber. Edshot was beginning to regain feeling in his limbs. Jester had achieved total victory without causing a single point of permanent physical damage. The psychological damage, however, was incalculable. He walked to the center of the lobby, to the large, embedded platinum seal of the HPSC on the floor. With a casual flick of his wrist, a can of black spray paint materialized in his hand, a gift of Loki's magic. He shook it once and, with elegant, flowing script, painted a single question over the symbol of order. Who watches the watchman? He capped the can, letting it dematerialize. He gave one last look to the assembled students, his gaze lingering for a moment on Ida's pale, horrified face. He gave a small, sad smile, a flicker of the old Midoriya buried in the depths of the Jester persona. It was a look that said, "I'm sorry you can't see the truth." Then, He dissolved into a swirl of green and black energy, vanishing as silently as he had arrived. He left behind a shattered institution, a group of traumatized heroes, and a class of students who now truly understood the nature of the enemy they faced. Tenya Ida stared at the graffiti, the question seeming to burn into his retinas. His meticulously ordered world was in ruins, its foundational rules exposed as fragile, arbitrary constructs. And the person who had handed him the sledgehammer was his best friend. He looked down at his hands, the hands of a hero in training, and for the first time in his life, he didn't know what he was supposed to do with them. The rules were broken, and he was terrifyingly, exhilaratingly lost.